everybody, and Happy New Year! I know this is actually my second video that I'm posting in 2020, but well, because this one is my top 10 of 2019, seems like the most appropriate video to say Happy New Year. I hope the entry into 2020 was good for you. I hope that the first week of 2020 has been good. In this video, like I said, I'm going to be counting down my top 10 reads of 2019. As always, when I do these videos, these are just based on the books that I personally read in the year. It is, you know, if I didn't read a book from a series, it doesn't get included regardless of whether I think that's a great series or not. Admittedly, in 2019, I read about a third of the novels that I typically have over the last couple of years. So the pickings were a little slimmer than usual. And a lot of the series that I have been a huge fan of the last couple of years that have placed very high on my top 10s, I didn't read any volumes of those series this year. So there's no Overlord, there's no Danmachi, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has been, you know, very dominant on my past top 10s that are not on this one. So, I mean, that could be kind of a good thing because it means there's more variety and different stuff on this list. I will say that this year there were at least my top two picks in particular were light novels that were newer series this year that absolutely blew me away and made me really excited and thrilled to read them, and kind of reignited aspects in me about my love of light novels and what they can do. So with all of that said, let's get to it. At number 10, this one is actually the third book of its series, and that is Suspension, Kubitsuri High School by Nishio Ishin. This one is published by Vertical and has a translation by Daniel Joseph. This is the third book in the Zarigoto series, Nishio Ishin's kind of odd detective murder mystery type series. This volume, kind of an interesting history to it. Zarigoto years ago, Del Rey brought out the first two volumes. Then now Vertical rescued those two volumes, sort of edited them, went through them again, released them. Now it's released this third book. This is the first time it's been officially released in English. And I found that I really enjoyed this book and how it had all sorts of similar elements of the first two books, the locked room murder mystery and everything else, and yet really kind of twisted the paradigm and made it feel like this series was going to suddenly go in a much different direction than what I had originally anticipated. I'm kind of a sucker for that when series do that, when it makes sense. And in this one, it definitely made sense. It still felt like, yes, this is definitely a part of the world that has been hinted at with the Zarigoto series. So I really enjoyed this third volume. It had a lot of good fun in it and made me really, really hopeful. Vertical, if you're watching, made me really hopeful that we will get more Zarigoto in the future. At number 9, and this one's actually, it's a one-shot currently, but definitely was left open that there could be more. And that is Masquerade and the Nameless Women. And this is by Eiji Mikage. It is again published by Vertical and has a translation by Daniel Morales. And this one, Eiji Mikage, if you're not familiar, is the author of The Empty Box and Zeroth Maria. So very famous light novel. In fact, a light novel series that I want to finish this year. It is one of my goals for 2020 because I really enjoyed the first two volumes. Masquerade and the Nameless Women is a murder mystery. It is a very interesting book, and Mikage kind of does the same thing that he does in Empty Box, where he kind of sets you up with a certain expectation and then kind of pulls the rug out from under you at near the end, but it makes sense, so you totally buy it. And it's an interesting tale basically about a serial killer who is masquerading as a consultant to the police and is brought in to consult on a murder that appears to be perpetrated by him but yet there are these inconsistencies, and it's this very interesting book of people, who do you trust, who do you not trust, the inconsistencies in terms of people's stories, this cat and mouse between the serial killer and one of the lead investigators, even though the lead investigator is not really aware that she's in a cat and mouse with this guy. It was a very interesting book, very different. I'm not sure whether I would call it exactly a light novel. Definitely the fact that it is by Mikage, it's going to be of interest to light novel fans. But I mean, it was relatively rooted in the real world, so it read much more like just a typical murder mystery than, you know, light novels almost always add that slight element of unrealism to things. But definitely a really good read, nice tension in the book, and like I said, some good twists towards the end that just kept me hooked. And when I finished it, I just was like, man, I hope that he brings these characters back, because they were just so interesting, and it felt like their story was just beginning. At number 9, we have volume number 1 of Der Werwolf, The Annals of Veit. This one is published by J-Novel Club. It's by Hyogetsu, with a translation by Ningen. This one I liked because it is an isekai series about a man who is reborn as a werewolf and actually works for the demon army. So I kind of liked the twist that it took on the whole, you know, defeat the demon lord. It's like, defeat the demon lord, I'm actually working for the demon lord. But it had a lot of really good elements, like the book, a good chunk of the book has to do with Veit occupying this city, this sort of vital on the trade route type city. And a lot of it has to do with him trying to be the administrator of this city and finding a balance so that the human inhabitants and the now demon inhabitants of the army, and that are maintaining control of the city, that there aren't going to be a lot of unrest. There isn't going to be a lot of violence, and that the city will continue to function, both because he realizes that's the best way just to do things, but also because they need that city to be a key factor in the continuation of the Demon Lord's army and the offensive that the Demon Lord is making. Some really good twists. I liked the character of Veit in it. Even it's one of those books that has like a short story at the end that's kind of like a backstory thing, and one of those stories that actually added a really cool element to the character and to the story overall. So I like this one. You know, it really did feel like an isekai that was doing something a little bit different and had some good smarts behind it. At number 7, we have Sexiled. This one by Ameko Karuda, published by J-Novel Club with a translation by Molly Lee. And I know I just posted my review of this, but I did finish reading it in 2019, so it counts. This one, I mean, I literally just posted the review. This one about the girl who is an adventurer is kicked out of her party because she's a woman and because her party leader thinks that he's doing her a favor because, you know, you're getting older. Go have babies. You shouldn't be an adventurer anymore. And about how she teams up with this ancient mythical sorceress to kind of get her revenge. This one I placed pretty high on the list. Just, you know, it was a very much of an emotional response. I really liked the mostly positive messages in the book. I really enjoyed the interactions between the main characters, Tanya and Laplace. I really enjoyed them as characters individually. There was a lot of good laughs in the book. For a book that is dealing with some heavier social topics, it really didn't come across as too heavy-handed or, you know, as a book that was seeking to be negative. I really enjoyed this one. Like I said, it was one of those light novels that made me feel good when I was finished reading it, and even while reading it, I just felt like the pacing was really nice, and there was just, I felt like I could just relax into it. So So this one, yeah, a really decent fantasy as far as I was concerned, and some good laughs in it as well. At number 6, 5 centimeters per second. This is Makoto Shinkai with the adaptation by Arata Kano. It's published by Vertical with a translation by Christy Fernandez. This is the story about a boy and girl who meet when they are children, and then they are forced apart, and it kind of follows their lives as they kind of start coming back together again, or getting closer to each other again after having been apart for so long. I don't know, this was one of those books that really resonated with me emotionally, that there were elements of the main character's journey that really hit close to home. In fact, there were a couple times where I just had to shut the book and put it down because I was like, oh, that's just a little too much and hitting a little too close. But I felt like there was a really powerful emotional journey in it, and I understand, I guess, that the movie may be, the movie is different. It's told from different points of view. I thought the point of views that were used in the book were very effective, and told a really strong story of growth, and also what happens when you can't let go of the past and, you can't move forward. And like I said, it was a book that I thought was very well written. I thought that the character emotions and the feelings of the characters and the journeys that they were on emotionally rang very true. And it really kind of hit me. And so it places up there on my list this year. At number 5, J.K. Haru is a sex worker in another world. This one is by Ko Hiratori. It's published by J-Novel Club and has a translation by Emily Balistrieri. This one, well, I mean, it's one of those light novels where the title pretty much tells you what it's all about. Haru, she dies. She's reborn in another world and she's got nothing. No superpowers, no cheats, no nothing. And figures the world is, basically for girls, especially girls who can't read or write, you basically have the option of a slave, marrying someone, or being a prostitute. And Haru kind of decides that as much as prostitution has its negative aspects, that it at least gives her some control over herself. And so she becomes a sex worker. It's one of those light novels that I mean, it was honestly like, it's the longest light novel review that I have ever recorded on this channel. Because there's just so much to unpack. In fact, we're going to do a full podcast on this series. But for me, I think the reason that I liked it is that it had a lot of commentary on prototypical isekai series as they are now. Addressing like there's a character in it that is also from Japan, and he does get the cheat abilities, and he is so the prototypical male isekai protagonist. And it's a very interesting book that has some very decent commentary on isekai, on the construction of isekai, on the archetypes of isekai. Haru's voice is very strong. She's a well-written character, has this, a very powerful female, but also vulnerable. I liked how her journey throughout, you got these glimmers of who she might really be. Like, she's one of those narrators that you kind of feel is putting a front even for you, the reader. So there was just a lot of really interesting things in that book that I found myself really drawn in. I found myself at times very uncomfortable. Like, I'm not going to lie, it's not a book for everybody. But I thought it had enough intelligent things to say that I really did enjoy it overall. At number 4 of my top 10, it is Torture Princess. This one is by Keiichi Ayasato. It's published by Yen On, and it has a translation by Nathaniel Hiroshi Thrasher. It's an isekai, which it really doesn't feel much like an isekai, but basically, that you're in for something a little bit different when the main character does not die by truck-kun or, you know, some other like accident or illness. Nope, the book opens up with him being strangled to death by his own father. You know that you're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. Things are gonna get pretty dark. And hoo boy, do they ever. Essentially, the main character's soul is plucked from the ether and put into a flesh golem. So basically a golem made of body parts. And his purpose is to serve as a servant to the torture princess, Elizabeth, who has been tasked by the church to destroy the demons that are plaguing the world, and then she herself will be put to death for her own crimes against humanity. This is one of those series that the imagery is so vivid and at times disturbing. One of those series where demons feel just like, I mean, you're talking like Dante's levels of hell type demons. Like, these are like so many of these light novels, you know, the demons never feel horrifying. And in Torture Princess, wow, did they ever. But there's so many different things going on in this book. Stories of redemption, stories of self-realization and self-actualization, stories about letting go of the past and growing beyond our hurts and our ideals of revenge. And there's a lot of different emotional things going on in this book. And it is such a good ride and had so many really good emotional aspects to it. Like I said, as far as an isekai goes, the kind of life experiences that the main character brings with him into this world are, well, you know, if you don't mind a bit of gore, it is definitely a light novel series that I would recommend. There is a lot of really cool stuff, very gothic imagery in the book, but yeah, definitely one of those books that I honestly bought because I loved the cover artwork. It's actually the same artist who did Black Bullet. It's perfect artwork for the series. But like, I just thought the covers were just so stunning for that series, and that was the main reason that I picked it up. And I ended up really enjoying this one. Definitely a series that I want to continue in 2020. My number 3 pick is a very specific volume, and that is going to be Koi Monogatari. So this one, I think it's like the 13th or 14th volume of the Monogatari series, depending on what numbering you go by. Which, you know, for a light novel series to be into the double digits of its volumes and to do something so different, but yet still so Monogatari and true to the series, it really blew me away. The way that it played with the whole paradigm of the series, that it was just as much about the personal journey of the narrator, and I'm not going to try and get into too many spoilers, but, you know, the narrator is immediately more interesting because of his backstory and because of how we have met him and how he has been portrayed in the series to date. The storyline of this, you know, basically you're trying to trick a god. The fact that the story, unlike like Monogatari, as much as I like the series, it often meanders for a while because Nishio Ishin just seems to love his wordplay and having his characters twist dialogue and everything else for a good long time. But Koi doesn't do that. It basically jumps in pretty quick and sets the field for what's going to happen. And I really enjoyed the fact that it had this sort of investigative aspect to it, that, you know, trying to figure out who is this person, how can I approach this person, you know, what's going to work on this person in terms of getting them to let this thing go. I was just really enraptured with this, and as I said, I've read a good chunk of the Monogatari series. It's probably one of the series that I'm the most caught up on, and it was bar none my favorite volume in the series to date. It was just so well done to me, and like I said, the main character, the narrator of this one, his story, almost a redemption story, but yet, because you can't trust him, who knows if there's actually redemption. Like, just a really powerful book, you know, and definitely got me more excited about where the Monogatari series was going to go from there. My number 2 pick for 2019 was volume number 1 of 86. This one by Asato Asato, published by Yen On, and has a translation by Roman Lempert. This is a fantasy tale, sort of an alt-world type tale about the Republic who is at war with the Empire. The Empire using AI-driven machines, and the Republic who for a very long time held themselves up as a grand democracy and a place of freedom. They are using weapons that are being piloted by people that they have basically forced out of their society because they are not pure. Because they show some heritage that is not from the native peoples of the Republic. 86 gets very, very much into race, politics, the way that we can easily dehumanize other people when we are threatened. It uses a very, very light novel mechanic to allow a member of the Republic to experience things that the 86ers, that's what they're called, experience on the battlefield, and to sort of see things through their eyes. It uses an even more light novel aspect to address sort of ideas of PTSD, you know, ideas of loss, and you know, it was such a well-constructed book. You know, a book that deals with some incredibly heavy, pressing issues without feeling preachy. I like the fact that, you know, it's the Republic. It's actually the country that is closest to, I would say, most of our Western ideals that has become the villain. You know, and they're fighting against this, like, just this faceless horde coming at them, and there's so many mysteries and things going on in the, I just, you know, it was a very well-written book, the imagery and everything else, and like I said, the way that it was able to convey these very heavy ideas without feeling heavy-handed, without feeling depressing as all get out, although there was certainly some of that. I mean, don't get attached to too many of the characters, because war is hell, and not all of them are going to get out of it alive. And it was just a really, really solid book. And it definitely, you know, I think I was a bit amped up to read the book because it had gotten some pretty decent word of mouth out of Japan. It had been in Kono Light Novel ga Sugoi. I was looking for something that was going to be a little bit different, you know, not an isekai or fantasy, but, you know, that more like alt-reality war type story. And it delivered. It was actually better than I had hoped or thought that it might be when I went into it. Definitely a series I'm going to continue because, like I said, just really well put together and enjoyable, and I want to see what happens with these characters going forward. And for my number 1 pick of 2019, this is a light novel that really surprised me, like really surprised me. And that's volume number 1 of Other Side Picnic. This one is written by Iori Miyazawa. It's published by J-Novel Club, and the translation is done by Sean McCann. Now, this series is an isekai, not isekai. Basically, it follows 2 girls who meet each other in an other world that they have been able to gain access to from our world. And it actually it starts off with the one having to save the life of the other. And for their own reasons, they decide that they want to travel together and explore this other world together. And the other side is populated by dangerous denizens who in many ways mimic urban legends, ghosts and monsters and things like that from urban legend. I think what really got me about this book was that, first of all, the characters are not perfect. They have definite flaws. And the fact that they were also smart about their adventures in this other side. They didn't treat it like it was going to be just like, you know, oh, look at us. No, like dressed in hiker gear. They are armed with weapons, like guns I'm talking here. I'm not just talking like, you know, a baton or whatever. I'm talking like full-on weaponry. I also really loved how this other side wasn't just contained to them, that, you know, it was more of like one of those things where you can fall into this world through cracks in our own world. And so they meet up with other people in this world, and it was cool to see how the experiences in this other side had impacted those people emotionally, psychologically. The imagery in this book is just like, there were times where I was reading it and I'm like, I don't even know how you come up with this. Like, I don't even know how your imagination pictures this. There was so much in the book that I thought to myself, man, this would be just such, with the right studio and the right director, this would be such a phenomenal anime. Like, oh, the visuals would just be killer. And so to me, I was really surprised by this one, pleasantly surprised by this book, because I did not expect to have such a strong reaction to it, to feel so powerfully attached to these characters. And I am definitely going to be reading more of this series in 2020, because I want to go back to that other side, and I want to travel with these characters in the other side. So those are my top 10 picks for 2019 of what I read this past year. How about you? What books did you read in 2019 that, you know, you can give me your top 10, you can give me your top 3, 5, just tell me what your favorite book was of 2019. As I said, it doesn't matter whether it was released in 2019. If you read it in 2019, it counts. So let me know in the comments down below what got your love this year. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me in this video. I look forward to seeing you in my next one, and hopefully many, many more videos in 2020. Until then, bye-bye for now.